I'm going cross-eyed trying to do that.
Okay, so we are ready to start our next talk. It's going to be about Selenium 2.0, WebDriver 2.0, whatever it is. I'm definitely looking forward to hear the talk. Jason Huggins, Simon Stewart, and we'll have a third person joining them in over there, and they apparently brought their groupies with them. I mean, they are fully prepared. So Dennis Turkol will be part of the presentation as well, and please go ahead and enjoy.
Are we going to do the song and dance number?
Right.
No.
Okay. Oh, I should probably turn on my mic.
Well, Jason's turning on his mic. I'll introduce myself. I'm Simon Stewart. I'm a software engineer in test at Google, and I'm also the primary developer of a web automation framework called WebDriver. My Twitter ID is SHS96C.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like it's on. I'm Jason Huggins. I am the co-founder at Sauce Labs. I'm also a former Googler and a creator of the Selenium testing framework. Also, my Twitter ID is jhuggins. And I'll just a little bit shameless plug about Sauce Labs. We do Selenium in the cloud. We're announcing today that we're actually selling commercial support. So on with the shameless plugs. We're done with those. Let's go on to our presentation. All right. So we could read these all to you, or we could just wait 10 seconds for you to read them.
You can all read, right? Okay.
Anyone sing your favorite song, Jeopardy song?
On hold music.
All right, now that you've read them, we'll just briefly summarize. We're going to talk about Selenium, WebDriver,
Why we're merging.
why we're merging, what does that mean, show some code, show some demos, talk about random ideas.
It'll be awesome.
Exactly. All right, on with the show. Right, so first, a little bit of history. The Selenium project is actually kind of a family of tools. I am the creator of just the first one that came along called Selenium Core. And I'll briefly just kind of show you what Core looks like, but also I will talk about the other tools that we have. We have something called Selenium IDE, which is for Firefox. It's an extension that you can use to record your tests. We also have something called Selenium Remote Control, which if you're a fan of real languages like Java or C# or Python or Ruby, PHP, or Perl, you can write all your tests in that language, and Remote Control will then run your tests for you. And then Grid, again, a shameless plug, Sauce Labs does this in the cloud, but Grid lets you, effectively it's kind of like a proxy server to distribute your tests. The big advantage is that it runs your tests in parallel, so it's faster. So briefly, Selenium Core tests look like this. If you're a real programmer, you would hide your eyes and leave the room crying, because this is terrible syntax. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. This is really lifted from Lord Cunningham, his fifth framework for integrated testing. He's more famous for creating the wiki. At the time we were creating Selenium, was looking for a test syntax. That was good enough. But the big thing about this is that you've got, it's a keyword-driven framework. The method name is in the first column, and then you're locked in to 2 parameters only, target and value. And you'll see the effects of this syntax later on in other Selenium tests, because Selenium Remote Control came along and had to be backwards compatible before. Selenium IDE for Firefox came along, created by a wonderful guy named Shinya in Tokyo, and it kind of looks, you can kind of see the syntax is a little bit similar to Core, very much explicitly on purpose for that. The 2 huge benefits of Selenium IDE over just plain Core is that it runs as a trusted browser extension, which means it's no longer limited to the security sandbox that JavaScript lives in. And so you can do cross-domain scripting. You can also test SSL encrypted sites. It's a nicer environment to be in as a trusted extension. The other nice thing about IDE is that it actually is a recording tool, which is wonderfully useful and evil, but useful for bootstrapping yourself into creating tests. It's evil because record playback is just evil. That's another topic for another day. But Selenium Remote Control came along, and effectively we've got 2 camps of users. You've got Core and IDE users on one side of the Selenium world, and then you have everyone who uses Selenium Remote Control and Grid on the other side. So this is for the real programmers in the room. The big thing to know about the Selenium server architecture is that this thing in the middle is a Selenium server process. And even if you're a Python fan like me, you write your Python tests, has a very thin client library. You talk HTTP to the Selenium server process running. and this is then on the same machine that Selenium server jar is running, it knows how to start a browser and proxies the test commands between your Python script on one side and the browser on the other.
Which has got Selenium core running in it.
Oh, right. The important thing to note, thank you, Simon,
That's okay.
is Selenium core is already in the browser, like we just said. But then Grid came along, and this is kind of the architecture. It's kind of a crazy slide here, but the important thing to know is instead of talking to a Selenium RC server like you would do here between your Python tests, you now actually talk to a Selenium hub server, which, depending on the configuration string you send it, will proxy that command to the correct browser configuration. That's the important thing to know about Selenium Grid. Now, Simon will tell you about WebDriver.
Ah, yeah, WebDriver. You may or may not have heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, the elevator pitch is that it's a developer-focused tool for the automated testing of web apps, which is kind of what Selenium does. So by developer-focused, what we mean is we've concentrated on having something which is nice and friendly for a developer to use. So, you know, if you hit Control Space and you're using WebDriver, the list of completions tries to guide you toward doing the right thing, and it tries to limit the number of choices that you can do, so you're never overwhelmed by like a screen full of possibilities. And automated testing, well, you know, we all know what that is. So it's always quite instructive to take a look at the WebDriver architecture, like how we built this thing. And the difference, one of the major differences between WebDriver and Selenium is the fact that we tightly bind to the browser that we're attempting to drive. And we go in as close as we can to it. In the case of Internet Explorer, we actually use the COM automation interfaces that Microsoft have so kindly provided and maintained between versions. It's brilliant. So the same sort of COM interfaces are present with IE 6, 7, and 8. So WebDriver works with IE 6, 7, and 8. And it works with XP, and it works on Vista. We run that in process, effectively. So we've got a sort of C library. And the Java binding, which you can see as this tiny box over here, that talks to that C library. If we wanted to add another implementation in Ruby or Python or something like that, rather than having to go down the entire stack, because we've put all the smarts in this C library, we just need to be able to call down. So FFI or C types or JNA in Java allow you to call the C library without having to do clever linking or anything like that. So it's a pretty lightweight way of getting hold of it. Of course, not all browsers run in the same process. So Firefox is a standalone separate process. So how do we communicate with that? Well, what we've done is we've written our own custom WebDriver extension, which we install quietly behind the scenes when you start Firefox driver. And we communicate with that via a JSON protocol over something that is starting to look more and more like HTTP. The reason why it's starting to look more and more like HTTP is that sometimes you don't want to run the browser on the same machine as the test. You want to separate these things. So we've taken a leaf out of Selenium's book, and we've got a standalone server process that you communicate with using a protocol that's based on JSON over HTTP. So ultimately what's going to happen is the Firefox driver is going to be an instance of the remote WebDriver. So anytime you want to communicate with something at a process, you can do that. The nice thing with that is because the protocol is shared, when you come to do an implementation in another language, Python, Ruby, C#, you get this one implementation of the protocol, and you get all the drivers that we support for free, because everything communicates with the same protocol. So we've lowered the cost of writing new implementations. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. Does that make sense? Cool. Go on.
I was going to say, one thing I like about WebDriver, being the Selenium guy, or especially particularly being a Python guy, is that there's this notion of WebDriver scaling down. If I just want to write one test on one machine, I don't want to have to use a remote API. I love the fact that WebDriver has, I just need a C library and I can talk to a browser directly. I don't need to start up this Java process. So Python browser, no Java in the middle. I love it.
Oh yeah, we keep on talking about Python. If you are a Pythonista, do easy install WebDriver, and you'll get the WebDriver API available for Python.
Yeah, we worked on that. There's a little bit of a hackfest earlier this week before the conference, and yeah, we got that going. Pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. So, Jason.
Right. So, if you watch all of your GTAC videos over the years, you might have seen the Simon and Jason show 2 years ago in GTAC New York. We gave separate talks, and then we did one shared lightning talk. I think we're the top Google hit for Steel Cage Knife Fight.
We are.
We can't tell your friends, link to it, and make us stay #1. But somewhere after GTAC New York and both the start of our career at Google, we hatched this plan. I don't know whose idea it was, but Selenium and WebDriver in similar spaces. We have a lot in common. There's some really cool tech in WebDriver. So like, hey, we should talk more than just in front of random groups of people and see what we should do. So what we're going to do is show off some code. Thank you.
That's okay. Here to help.
Thanks. So we're going to step through some code with a very simple test. Basically, it's the same test. One using the Selenium API, and then again with the WebDriver API. And then we'll do some crazy stuff. But first, I'm going to show you what the manual test would be. Going to google.co.uk.
Because we're here in Switzerland, and if you go to .com, you'll be redirected to some random site.
Right. So Google Suggest is here. I type in Selenium IDE, and the big important part about this little demo is I'm going to click the arrow key on my keyboard down, and you notice that the first row is highlighted.
I noticed the first row is highlighted.
Right. Notice that. That's the important part of the demo. So I'm just going to close this, and now I'm going to switch to my IDE.
Hi.
Thank you.
I'm here to prompt Jason, basically.
Right. So the important thing to know is that you've got the Selenium objects, you've got the open command, type keys command. Selenium is one of those issues about the Selenium API. We've got lots of different methods for typing for historical reasons. The actual type command didn't actually type, it just set the value. But people complain about that. You've got an Ajaxy thing like Google Suggest. So type keys came along that actually will fire the events. But still, sometimes it doesn't get that right. So then we have another command you don't see here called type keys native, which actually uses the robot library. But even then, that's actually not native. It's the robot library got its own issues. So typing is a little bit of a tar pit in Selenium. Anyway, just pointing that out. Other things to note is that we've got every Selenium API method, we've got those 2 parameters to be compatible with Selenium core. The locator, we have multiple locator strategies. We look for name, ID, XPath, CSS selector, or just plain old JavaScript to find something. I mean, the locators here. Other things to note is that Selenium does explicit weighting. Actually, WebDriver has the same
WebDriver does it too.
feature, right. Other frameworks like Windmill and Water do implicit weighting. We're doing explicit weighting, so we are both realizing we're going to be embarrassed into making weights implicit, not explicit. And then the last thing, key up. The not so nice thing about the API is that
does anyone know what that Unicode character is for? That's the down arrow.
right, but
It should be
nothing
obvious.
to help you out with that. So anyway, I'm just going to run this test briefly.
Carry on hiding.
There you go.
Ooh.
And there's the test. And it ran. It fired off that event, but it didn't quite work. For whatever reason, it did fire the down arrow, but if you actually look at the muck around with the implementation of Google Suggest, it didn't really key off the key off event. That's a very explicit JavaScript key off event. If you do it as a human, it really is several events should have gotten fired from the keyboard. Key down, key up, and key press.
Yeah, maybe
and
text
Google Suggest actually keys off of one of those other ones. But as a developer of Selenium, sometimes you can't quite get it right. It's kind of annoying. So, where did it go?
There it is.
Right. Now, I'll show you the tests, or Simon will show you.
I'll show you.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, okay. So this is the WebDriver API. You'll notice that it's still Java. We get hold of a WebDriver instance, and rather than open, we get a URL. I named it after the HTTP verb, thinking that would be obvious. I still think it's obvious.
Why isn't it open?
Why isn't it open? That's because it's not.
Because get was more
get
obvious.
is more obvious.
Got it.
You could also go webdriver.navigate. Oh, okay. Look, we'll do it this way. Navigate dot. Come on, give me a dot. All right, give me 2 dots. There we go. Driver navigate to http google.co.uk. I hope this works now that I've changed it.
Have fun with this.
So what we do then is we find an element by name Q. So whereas the Selenium API has a sort of opaque string that you happen to know the syntax of internally, the WebDriver API makes it explicit, the finding mechanisms. And I can show you how explicit we make it. By, you know when I said, you hit control space and it tries to lead you through? Hit control space, tries to lead you through. So we find by class name, ID, link text, name, partial link, you can all read. So we find the element on the page. Q is the main search box. We then send keys rather than type. I wanted to emphasize when we were creating the API the fact that you were using the keyboard to send keyboard input to the browser. So like you may think of it as typing, and when you're typing into an input element, that makes a lot of sense. But when you're trying to use keyboard shortcuts in Gmail, you're probably thinking of it like I'm using the keyboard, like I'm using the keyboard shortcut. So that's why it's saying keys. We then have an explicit wait with a timeout measured in seconds, and we wait for this element to be visible. And then we send an arrow down. Shall I run this?
Yes.
Chances of it working? Now that I've changed it.
It's guaranteed to work awesome and flawlessly.
Thank you, Chief. Yes! And can we have a round of applause? Last time I did this demo, it didn't work. That was 2 years ago. I've had a lot of time to practice. You'll notice that the IDE, like the first option, has now been selected. So we're actually sending the right keyboard events when you hit the key down. I will probably not mean to do that. Jason.
Right. So the important thing to know that yes, we've got these two tests with two different APIs. You could argue that the WebDriver API is more lovely to use it in an IDE like IntelliJ or Eclipse. But the really important thing out of this talk, out of all the important, awesome things that we're going to say, is that if you are an existing Selenium user, you do not have to migrate your test to the WebDriver API to start using it. One will show you some magic thing here, that instead of using the Selenium implementation, I will show you the WebDriver implementation. This is magic, where you get to take your existing Selenium test, and it will now be using WebDriver behind the scenes to actually execute the test, but you don't have to change your test at all.
If we scroll down, we can prove it.
Here? Or
yeah, just scroll down all the way. Look. WebDriver back Selenium with a instance of the Firefox driver. Right. So we're taking the existing WebDriver API and we're adapting it and making it look like the Selenium API.
So I'll repeat again, you don't have to migrate to the WebDriver API, but you could if you wanted to. So let's run this test.
That's not it. That's it again. Yeah. There it is.
Oh, what? Let's just try this again.
Let's kill random Firefox windows until we get bored of it.
Hopefully that'll work. Oh, hey.
What do you mean, hopefully?
And just note at the bottom, that actually was WebDriver running it. You see if WebDriver is running, got WebDriver in the bottom of it. And notice the line got highlighted, even though this is the Selenium test. So pretty cool, eh?
Yep.
All right.
Well, of course, go on.
And now, because we're such wonderful friends, we love sharing. So it's wonderful that Selenium can be backed by WebDriver, but to complete the wonderful tricks we have up our sleeves, or should I let you?
No, you can. You're doing a sterling job, yeah.
All right. So you actually could have WebDriver implemented, use the WebDriver API, and actually have it Selenium execute the test behind the scenes. So if I actually go here, now run this test, and then magically hide my
Drum roll.
IDE, and now this is actually the WebDriver API, but it's actually running the Selenium test behind the scenes. Right, and notice it did send the little key. Oh yeah, we're all testers here. So
Yeah, everyone spotted that instantly, even though it's in the tiny,
right,
tiny
that
window.
actually supposedly was the key down thing, that Selenium got some little bug there, that it actually just rendered it instead of actually sending it as a proper native string.
So one of the nice things with the project merge is that I'll be able to fix that for you.
Am I the only one not like that? I don't know which one of these Firefoxes is the actual demo.
There it is.
That only took 10 seconds.
So the takeaway point here is that you can interoperate between the APIs. So if you've got an existing set of Selenium tests and you want to do a managed migration over to the newer API, that's going to be possible. If you've got the WebDriver API and you decide that you want to use the Selenium one, that's also possible. Inadvisable, but possible. The other thing as well is that by using Selenium, WebDriver can provide support for browsers that we don't currently have support for, notably Safari, but also things like Camino, Conqueror, and the smaller browsers in the market. There we go. Strengths and weaknesses.
Yes, there are strengths and weaknesses of Selenium and WebDriver, and we will talk about them now.
Yes, we will. One of the things that I really like about Selenium is the fact that it's just pure JavaScript. When you come up to a new browser, when Google launched Chrome, rather than having to have an intern in for 3 months to write a Chrome driver, Daniel in the front row wrote the Chrome driver. It was just a simple case of modifying the browser launcher and maybe tweaking some of the JavaScript. It was a pretty low impact change to make. So it's lovely and easy to support new browsers. And also because it's in JavaScript, it's a language that people are familiar with. It's super easy to extend out and add new capabilities. So things like the UI element extension, which hardcore Selenium IDE and Selenium core users may be familiar with, is written as just a chunk of JavaScript that uses this common API. Of course, you know, the downside is that it's trapped in the JavaScript sandbox. You can't do nice things like cross-domain scripting or uploading files unless you somehow manage to elevate your privileges. And personally, I find, you know, hitting control space and having several screenfuls of options slightly terrifying. I did grep over and word counter over the API, and there's something like 150 methods.
Right. Yeah, the Selenium namespace is a little bit Selenium's kind of like the PHP of test tools. Everything's in one big namespace. And,
that's the second time we've name dropped PHP.
Right. So on that note, I can interrupting.
Mm-hmm.
There's some strengths about WebDriver that I really like, and the one, is the API. Everything is namespaced properly. The two big things, you've got things that were driving the browser itself, starting it and stopping it, is properly siloed into a bucket of a nice little namespace, and then you have all of the dealings with elements. It's just nice. I love it. The other thing, though, is for me, the important reason to merge the projects is we have okay support for Firefox, but really IE was the biggest thing that WebDriver was getting right. That Selenium really architecturally couldn't get right because we had so much stuff implemented in JavaScript. We're just architecturally at this. We solved 80% of the problem, and that last 20% we're going to have to do it a fundamental different way. And WebDriver is doing it. So we're Selenium to go forward with better support in existing big browsers and for newer browsers. Getting out of the confines of JavaScript sandbox is really important for us.
WebDriver really does get all the way out of the JavaScript sandbox, by the way. When you see us doing keyboard input on Linux and on Windows, and at some point we'll do it on OS X as well, we're actually sending keyboard input at the operating system level directed at the window. We don't demand window focus in order to do that, but we do send proper OS level keyboard events. One of the nice advantages of that is that you can hit key down. One of the disadvantages is if you hit Control B, you're going to open up the bookmarks window in Firefox. Somebody filed that as a bug with me recently, and it's like, no, it is meant to open. That's a keyboard shortcut for doing it.
So I will also say that there is, I guess, one big weakness. Weaknesses. That's a lot of us. Anyway, so it's not all just.
Can someone spell?
Weak knees. The one besides Simon's ability to spell.
No, it's true. I can't spell.
So Selenium, it was easy to bring on board new browsers, and on the flip side, it's really hard to bring on new browsers in WebDriver because if you saw that one architecture slide to get the IE thing going, you have a C library that talks to C++ code. You've got the Java library. You have to know some really how big is the worldwide market who knows C, C++, Java, and the internals of IE. Yeah, a couple of them might be in the room. But outside this room, the worldwide number doesn't go up that much. So it's that much more important for the project to have
Silos.
silos, right? But yes, having really geeky C and C++ developers on the project, or Selenium could get away with just some people who know stuff.
Well, it doesn't. You don't need to know every language out there. I mean, I think I describe it as a masochism of languages occasionally. But if you want to work on one particular browser and that's what you're interested in, then you don't need to know C++ to work on the Firefox driver, for example. And if you want to do a language binding, you don't need to know any of it. You just need to be able to speak JSON and HTTP even, or call down to a C library. So if you've got a particular skill set, there's probably part of WebDriver that you could work on.
Yeah. To be fair, the thing I like about the social innovation, besides technical, about the WebDriver, is that things are properly separated. So we can have browser vendors who just know their browser can implement to an API. In the Selenium project, we actually did follow this rule of the don't repeat yourself. The problem is we had the API implemented once. We had this crazy build process that was implemented in JavaScript and XSLT that code-generated all the libraries. Yeah, insane. But only one person on the planet actually knew all those things. Anyway, so the WebDriver project is, even though you have to know, we have to bring on C and C++, people who know that tech, the project is now set up so those people with those skills can
Easily contribute.
Exactly.
There we go. If you do want to easily contribute, by the way, go to selenium.googlecode.com. You can download the code and send me patches. That would be lovely. We should talk about to 2.0 and beyond, because that's what people are here for.
Yes.
Well, they're not here for that only. So, 2.0.
Right, so it's already...
No.
Okay, well, anyway, the path to 2.0 is some social things and some actual code things. So on the social side of things, we need to merge our mailing lists, how we actually talk. Do we actually talk to each other? We are. We are now on developers list on Google Groups. We've also, the big thing, I would like to say we, but really this means Simon, migrated the code, the separate code repositories for WebDriver and Selenium. We're now on Google Code, selenium.googlecode.com. That was a big thing to do, so we're now all in the same place.
We're not done yet, though. We've currently got separate issue tracking systems. The Google Code guys have been fantastic. They've recently released a GData API that allows you to automatically create and modify issues. So we're going to take advantage of that, and we're going to pull all the bugs into one place. So finally, the project will be one happy family. And to celebrate that, what we'll do is we'll do the 2.0 release. What will the 2.0 release look like? It'll look like someone's taken the WebDriver jars and the Selenium jars, unzip them into the same package, and then package them up again, because that's probably how we're going to do it. So that the initial 2.0 release is going to be one download with both APIs available in an Uber jar.
Yeah, I think in this country we should have put the umlauts over it.
We should have done heavy metal umlauts all over it.
Right, so Uber with or without the umlauts, but a little bit of Uber jar.
Go for it. Oh yeah, 2.x, I should talk about that. So the initial release is just going to be like us slamming everything together. But like Jason, like we said with the typing thing, there's sort of stuff in WebDriver that Selenium can use, and there's bits in Selenium that WebDriver can use. So the 2.x lifecycle will be a hybridizing one, where we take the best bits from both frameworks, and we merge them. So to a user, the API is going to remain consistent and solid. We may deprecate some methods, we may not, but your test will continue to work. But behind the scenes and in the architecture, we're going to be doing, we're going to be breaking it up into three major pieces. The first piece is JavaScript is a fantastic language for interacting with a browser. You can query it, so you can get the document title, you can find out element attributes, and you can do these sort of read-only operations. So we're going to extract a common set of JavaScript libraries, and we're going to be able to use those to query the DOM. Because it's useless to have JavaScript libraries unless you can execute that JavaScript. So the second bit will be a series of JavaScript executors, really. The most basic one will be based on Selenium Core, and that will be trapped in the JavaScript sandbox. But the more advanced ones will be based on the WebDriver technology, which allows you to take advantage of all the nice things that we've done with WebDriver. Finally, it's not enough to just query the browser and go, how are you doing? Because it'll go, I'm on about.blank, and there's nothing to see. You need to interact with it. So we'll be extracting a library for doing keyboard and mouse interaction, which will enable you to interact with the browser, either using synthesized events, using accessibility APIs. So if you can give the browser window focus, we'll be able to do as good as the operating system allows, or the current WebDriver approach, where what we do is we don't demand focus. That requires some hackery, and it's not perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than it could be. And it does mean that you can carry on reading your email while your tests are running. And we all know that these end-to-end tests take the better part of a millennia to run. Does that make sense? I don't know why I ask you these things. I shouldn't have. So it's going to be 3 pieces. The important point, for a user, it's going to look the same. But behind the scenes, we're going to be breaking things out and making it far more modular and pleasant to work with. So, when does it all happen?
You do it better than I do.
It's already started. So we've I love that slide.
Not technically a robot, but robotish.
Robotish, and it's on a keyboard, look. Yeah, see? So, yeah. So it's already started. We're already co-hosting the code in the same place. We're merging the issue tracking. But also, Jason's been checking in code to the WebDriver code base, and I've been threatening to check into the Selenium one. So we're going to end up starting that hybridization process sooner rather than later, and kicking things off.
Exactly.
So where are we now? We're in Switzerland. But where are the where's the WebDriver support? Like, it's not enough just to have Java support. Because not everyone programs Java for some reason. And there's a range of different browsers out there. So WebDriver promises to support the big 4 languages, which is Java, Python, Ruby, and C#. There's also a JavaScript API. So if you do all your work in pure JavaScript, we've got a JavaScript API. It isn't as capable or fully fledged as I was going to say real programming language. JavaScript is a real language. But we strip out, for the sake of simplicity, the ability to do conditional logic and loops. So if you want to do a straight-run test through your code, that's pretty cool. So you could do like a unit test style with it. But if you want to do an end-to-end test, we strongly advise using the proper language.
Also point out that in the Selenium project, Selenium 1.0, where we are, there's actually Big 6. The 2 ones that are obviously not on here are PHP and Perl.
We mentioned PHP 3 times now, 4 times now.
Right, so I encourage, we've got our hands full with Selenium and WebDriver. If anyone's watching this in PHP land or Perl land, we highly encourage their contributions to the project.
Yeah, if you do want to get started, the remote protocol is the place to go. Because then you can use the remote WebDriver to drive Firefox, IE, Chrome, and remote. We've got language bindings now. There's a GitHub somewhere which has all the Ruby code in. And that Ruby code supports Firefox, IE, Chrome, and remote. It's parallel to the Java one. It's got the same level of capabilities. The C# code, Andre, who's sitting over here, recently did a pretty big update. So the C# implementation, the IE driver, is now up and running. And the Python code, Jason's been working on that.
Right, so I get the name right,
Aaron.
And I worked on Tuesday to make it easily installable. So actually you can do easy install WebDriver. Of course, once you bring it out to Selenium 2, but you can do easy install WebDriver now, and you don't have to start a Selenium process in the middle. It's wonderful. So for Python and Firefox, it's actually kicking some butt. It's good code working right now. Yeah. We need to bring online IE and Chrome soon.
Yep, and we'll end up doing the interop stuff as well. So if you've got an existing suite of Python tests using Selenium, you won't need to rework all of your Python tests.
In our little hack fest earlier this week, you can obviously Python guys, or sorry, the Ruby guys are a little bit more prolific than the Python guys in the room. So a little bit of competition going on.
I beg your pardon? There's someone saying in the audience, we'll get the gem in about 3 days. So gem install. You should probably call it Selenium.
Right. Selenium, yeah, Selenium 2. Right.
Selenium too.
That much more competition for the Python guys to get their act together, aka me and Aaron, and get this stuff going for the other browsers.
Cool. So plans and schemes. I think I'd like to introduce Dennis from Opera Software, who is going to try and set up his machine. I will ad-lib for a little bit. So one of the nice things with WebDriver is the fact that we've developed it test-driven. So we've got a suite of around 300 tests that you can use to verify that the implementation is doing what it should. And the other nice thing is that we're nicely siloed. So, siloed. We're nicely modularized, that's the word. So you could take the interfaces and you can implement it. We've got one implementation that sits on top of HTML unit, for example. So if you're a Java hacker, what you can do is you can run your tests in memory super fast, which is kind of cool because it means that, are you ready? Okay, cool. I'll stop talking then and let Dennis.
I'm Dennis. I'm from Opera Software, based in Opera Norway, and I'm from Opera WebDriver. It's a WebDriver implementation of Opera. So why have we chosen to implement WebDriver? There are obvious reasons. We have two reasons. First, we need to test the browser. We have thousands of tests, hundreds of thousands, and we want to automate them. And man-hours are precious, and it's a boring task to do all the tests one by one. So we implement WebDriver to get all the tests in milliseconds, and it doesn't get bored. It's just a box run. Where do we use it? We use it in the screenshot testing. We have 20,000 visual tests. In the browser, we have to check that the rendering is correct. So we have a screenshot algorithm that is taking 6 screenshots, but it's quite slow. So we have adapted WebDriver and using our new protocol. Now we take 20,000 screenshots 10 times faster than we did before. And the good part about adapting WebDriver to the test is that we support multiple devices. Opera doesn't just work on desktop, it also works on the console, like we Nintendo Wii, by the way. And it also works on the mobile browser, like Windows Mobile. And it also works on TV. So the whole idea was that when you get WebDriver, it can work on every platform. This one better, yeah. Okay, and we support multiple devices. To achieve that, we have a protocol named Scope. It's a raw socket protocol over TCP. It's currently using XML, but it's a bit overheaded. So we switched to protocol buffers and JSON for the next protocol. And this protocol lets us use the same test, exactly the same test, on every device that we ship on. We implemented the WebDriver common interface, so it should be a drag and drop solution. And we also implemented some extra API. And the last extra API that I implemented was stolen from Simon's idea. It's the Actions API. He suggested that in the hackathon 2 days ago. And I'm going to show you a demo of how it works.
So while Dennis is plugging in his machine, I think the important thing here is that Opera support. How awesome is that? And that you can take your tests, your WebDriver tests, and run them on your mobile devices. There really isn't a huge amount of frameworks that can test the web browsers on a mobile device, so it's kind of nice to have that. Wow, that was fast. It's up on his screen, but not in the. There it is, look, sneaking in and disappearing, and sneaking in, and no, okay. I'll carry on ad-libbing. There we go.
And also the browser. So let's run the. It's on. No,
Yeah,
okay.
that's a big font for the hard of sight. It'll encode beautifully onto YouTube.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run tests on this.
So this is, yeah.
We use the Opera debug protocol, which is also used by Dragonfly, our debugger. So you can see the tests running here. The first one I'm going to run is one of the WebDriver tests.
So Dennis is about to just kick off some of WebDriver's own internal test suites that we use to verify that the drivers work.
Yeah, it ran. Okay.
That was fast.
Yeah, that was okay.
Did you blink?
Yeah,
Did
it's
you
going to be
blink
much
and miss
faster.
it?
So it took 0.6 seconds for 12 tests. It's the one of the tests from WebDriver Common. But let's look at the extra API that we support apart from WebDriver.
Okay, perfect. GTAC test case. There it is. And
From this one.
so, unknown to you, Opera is doing a heck of a lot of stuff, or it was doing a heck of a lot of stuff.
Connect, and let's see. It's a live test, so I'm hoping it's going to work. Yeah.
Okay, that's
okay.
fast.
So yeah, it's okay. So let's see what tests I have run. Yeah. This extension is I can. So we ran the essential Google test. Everyone knows this one, I'm guessing.
So it's very similar to the one we just ran. Yeah.
This is the one on the project page. So it just went to Google and it typed Opera and it said submit, and it checked that the page source contained a link to our page. Come on.
It's actually really hard. Shall I hold the microphone for you so you can use two hands on the keyboard?
Thank you. Okay, and wow, that's quite nice. And the second test is quite nice. It shows the Actions API. I added some comments here. I am very bad with comments, but I finally commented the WebDriver implementation I made. So hopefully when it's public, it's going to be possible to read it. What I do, I load Google, find the element queue, and type Opera software. And then I click escape because it suggested some stuff, which I don't want. And then I click the element queue again, and then I click tab twice and press enter. These can also be key down and key up. And this should press I'm feeling lucky. And if you are really lucky, it's going to load Opera software. Since it passed, I think it did. Okay.
Do you want to show people the API? Ah, here it comes.
Yeah, here it comes. So this is exactly the same API that Simon suggested. What it does is that it has an action that you can do a keyboard key, and then you can do a mouse click on. Then you can do a keyboard key, or you can do a keyboard key down. We show you the possible APIs.
So this is heavily inspired by the stuff that the Window Licker guys have done. They've come up with a beautiful API, and we're talking with those guys as well.
Yeah, so you can do key down, key up, or you can release the keys that you clicked, and you can also, I don't know what else. You can also do button down on, button up from, click on, move on the mouse. And when you execute, it's going to execute all of them in order. And then you can get your result from the page. This test is very specific to us. It's a contains color test. I try to load the Google page and find the logo image and check if it contains color maroon. In Opera, we have tests that pages that should not contain any red or green. And to optimize those tests, we added a contains color API. So you can just say element contains color, and it's going to take Opera colors. Actually, it can take an array, and it's going to return a result if it contains any of these colors.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
One other demo.
Yeah, I have just one few remaining. And we also have the screenshot API, which Michael showed a few days ago. It's also supported in the Opera, the way he has. We also support it in another way. We can just get the hashes of the images from the browser. So we don't need to download the whole image. What we do, we get the two images, and we tell the Opera to give us the hash. And then we match these hashes, and if the hashes are a match, it's a pass.
Cool.
And you also support select all, cut, paste, etc. So everything is supported from the browser, and there is no hacky-backy solution. It's the protocol that's handling everything.
Fantastic. Thank you. There we go. That mic doesn't work anymore. Oh, well, I'll mute this one. I'll hold this one for you as well.
I think I can hold it. Oh, wait, you might actually.
Okay. So plan schemes, bright ideas. Implicit weighting, we're planning on doing that because it's kind of obvious and useful. And it's something that people need. So especially with Ajax applications becoming far more popular. Are we done? Excellent. I don't know why I was holding it like that. I look like a lemon. So Ajax applications, it's going to be important to do that. What else have we got?
Not sure if I heard you say anything about IDE or Grid.
IDE and Grid.
Right. We didn't mention IDE other than me saying it right now. As far as what the plans are for 2.0, we should probably talk about it over beers maybe afterwards, but for the benefit of the people on the video, we'll say we should have some plans for that. But right now they're in the plan schemes and bright ideas. It will be supported going forward. We will improve the IDE. Grid, ideally, will just be Grid and support what it does now, yep. And it'll just be backed by WebDriver. But we should have more formal plans, but we don't have them today.
Simple matter of programming.
Exactly. We're running out of time. I do have, I guess we had one more things today. One was the native Opera support. The other one is, should I go into that?
Yeah, you can show off. So Jason hasn't looked at the code base very often. And when he did, he noticed one thing that made him squeal with excitement. It was actually quite embarrassing to be near him when he did it. And that was the fact that we run on the iPhone as well. So we've got a little application that wraps a web view, runs on the iPhone. It's called WebDriver, written by a chap called Joseph Gentle.
I should just click play.
You should just click play. And hi. Dun, 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 dun.
So this was our expected applause line.
Yeah.
But I was applauding when I first saw this demo. So if I can dare to make a prediction, future GTACs, GTACs talks, it's all iPhone and Android future that we'll be living in, and Opera as well for mobiles, and BlackBerries and all the other ones. But there'll be a lot more mobile talks in the future, I suspect. It won't just be a last-second web testing demo talking about iPhones. Anyway, pretty cool, eh?
Cool. Back to the slide deck.
If I can figure out which one.
I'll do the on-hold music.
I should just close them all.
No. Go to the first one.
Oh, yeah. There you go. So I think we are, unless we have any more bright ideas.
No, I don't have any bright ideas.
Then open for questions. And we have maybe 10 minutes, or a little bit less than that for questions.
Cool. Any questions? Or was that fantastic?
Wait for the mic, I guess, to come to you.
I think we may get away without having to answer any difficult question.
Yeah, we're close there.
Like, what's it going to be called would be an obvious one.
All right.
It's going to be called Selenium 2, probably.
Can I start with the question?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So at Comcast, we have implemented continuous testing with Selenium Grid, Hudson, and Subversion. Now, one of the problems we had with continuous testing is Hudson produces the emails every time something breaks, and we go to the Hudson console. Is there another report generating process that we could use when test cases are running continuously? Or do we have to have a scheduler on a Mac machine or something like that?
I would say that reporting tools specifically is out of scope for the Selenium project. If you go and talk to many commercial vendors, they would say, oh, yes, we'll sell you wonderful reporting tools. And of course, now I'm a corporate entity. I will, of course, then say, oh, yeah, we'll sell you some reports, too. If you use our service, they'll be online. They'll be very pretty. But as far as the open source project, reporting tools is out of scope. The expectation is that you write your tests using TestNG or JUnit or PyTest. You write to that. That's the point of integration to a Hudson or any other kind of continuous integration server. So you code to a unit test library. You find another product like Hudson or something else that actually does those reports. But we've got our hands full just keeping browsers running. That reporting engine is hard to do.
Yeah. However, if you wanted to do it on the cheap, VNC is a recordable protocol. Like there are VNC to FLV, that's the name of the project, I think it is, will allow you to record a VNC server. So if you can set the display of your browser to use that, then you can record a test run, and maybe you can include that as a build artifact in Hudson. Cool?
Right. Yeah, I don't know if video recording was part of the question, but if it was.
Oh, it's kind of a nice reporting,
Right.
debugging aid.
And again, you're giving me these softballs, but my service, we record videos of all the tests that we run.
Potentially another softball. Could you smack talk some of your competition a little bit? I guess now that it's not each other. I know windmills out there. I'm not sure what else there is actually.
Well, I could be really controversial or polite. I don't know if I should be. I want to go mean, but I'll try to temper my words. Let's see. As far as the competition, water and Selenium have been around the longest, but because of the way Selenium and water were implemented, we never quite could figure out exactly how kind of to do a merger. But I will just say that there is, I can't really smack talk the water guys at all, but WebDriver is apparently becoming kind of a common ground, the Switzerland, if you will, of places that we can kind of come together and work together that we weren't able to do it before WebDriver came along. As far as Windmill in particular, I've said this to them to their face, so I could say it publicly as well, that I think they took the wrong bits from Selenium and implemented that just in Python. And I love the fact, I felt the same way, that having a Java server in the middle it felt dirty. Being a Python guy, I just want Python in my browser, and that's it. And so I agree with them in theory on what they did, what they were trying to do. But what they did is they took the same limitations that Selenium has by proxying commands. They're not actually driving the browser natively like WebDriver is. So things like pop-ups, like file download boxes, all kinds of things, they're still kind of stuck. They're proxying commands that ultimately are run in that JavaScript sandbox. That's the biggest difference between the Windmill and Selenium. So I'm with them on we need to have pure Python stuff, but in that sense, Selenium 2.0 architecturally, technically, is a better platform than how Windmill built their stuff up.
I should say, if anyone wants to build a better API or a better testing tool on top of WebDriver, that's cool. Like, it's a tool for building more sophisticated tools. And sort of on a project, I'd expect developers to be sort of writing code that would make it easier for the QA team or even developers to write meaningful tests. But, there's no reason why you couldn't build something like the current Selenium API on top of WebDriver. In fact, there's so little reason not to do it that we did it. Next question. Anyone? We obviously explain things really well.
Possibly. Everyone wants to just get the lunch.
No, it's just that lunch is coming up next.
Lunch is coming up next. Excellent. Well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to the speakers.